Hi.
But you get here.
I know, that's why I threw them here.
Whatever it is. I think we're gonna do it. We're not gonna do it.
I'm down.
We gotta get one more.
Then well, then you know what? I'm away from my shoulder.
It didn't blow away?
I love my kids. But my
I'm sure. We have a good solid base, and we are.
in my 20s, I never would have said I'd like to be alone. Oh.
Someone
Now,
needs to track, unfortunately.
Isn't that commercial the State Farm commercial? It's like, I'm never doing this.
Oh, that's a
Yeah, I thought it was very good.
That's a great question.
Yeah. I don't know, was that super long?
That's a good question.
Nine o'clock at night, but
It's great. They go and they have more kids.
Yeah.
Hey Chad, I never thought of this, but when we stream, that's done through our YouTube. So that may show up as the most current video last
Like a couple months. Farmers was always seems
which is, again, it's another way to watch.
Exactly.
I don't know if it does or
I
not.
wonder if we'll find out.
Yeah, either would show up
And I
as the most recent
We
video,
don't have
maybe,
a
but I'm not positive. It's done through the same account, so it may be separate.
That's also.
Right, that's what we've done on the house.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Good, have a good day. See you.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, at least you can see it coming about. Yes, yeah. Well, I may need a little bit of guidance to make sure that I forgot, you know, that's what.
Weather briefing. This week we have Paul Knight, who is a senior lecturer in Optic Meteorology, Pennsylvania State climatologist, co-host of Weather World. He wears many hats, so this should be a great discussion about an exciting weather pattern with maybe some chances for snow too.
We'll look at the weather in just a moment, but to give you an outline of where we're going with regard to this presentation, at least in the time that we have, is that we have a fascinating week coming up. If you want to divide these into weeks, that is that there's this slap shot of chill that's coming in tonight and tomorrow. There's a clipper that literally bombs over Pennsylvania and points east during Saturday and Sunday. There's this deep, perhaps near record chill, depending upon which sort of guidance you want to see, Sunday and into Monday morning. Then there's an interesting warm advection, moderate snow, potential ice next Tuesday and Wednesday. And it looks like the cold air is going to slosh back in again for the middle of next week. So if you're reading this sign, you shouldn't, because you're under penalty of law. So I will also, if time permits, I'll also talk about what will the spring bring too. But let's go back and actually look at the weather, since that's really what's most interesting. And the change of what's been going on today, of course, it was around 10:30, 11 o'clock is when the boundary, at least a boundary, moved through. Obviously, these sort of fronts are in waves, so it's not a single millimeter, but there's several waves that came through, and that one was the most impressive one. It brought a nice squall, and I guess at least a measurable amount of snow is built around here. So I read? No? You know, okay. Well, the Ministry of Truth can tell us what was the amount that actually fell. But look at the temperatures upstream of us. It's down to 5 degrees in Toronto and 7 in London, Ontario. And north of there, of course, it's been steadily falling below zero. And of course, that is at least a taste of what's coming. And indeed, the winds have shifted into the west. One of the things I like to look at too, since we know that the surface tends to be a bit messy, but if we look at 850, we'll probably get a better sense of what's coming our way with regard to the thermal pattern. And here is the, I suspect this is the 12Z analysis from the balloon launches earlier today. And notice that the 850 temperatures at Flint was -20. I'm not sure who this one up here is in northern Michigan. Is that a news station? Anyway, I always thought it was near Sault Ste. Marie. Used to have a station there. -22. And if you look at the winds that are blowing that air in a south-southeastward direction right toward us, and if we want to get really excited about what's coming later on, we look way up here in the northern part of the Northwest Territories, and for that matter, Land of Nunavut, I guess they call it. We see parts of Baffin Island are down to -35 in 850, -34 in the northern part of Quebec. So there's a fairly wide area of -30 degrees Celsius, which is about as low as the temperature typically gets at 850 millibars in the northern hemisphere winter. So that's kind of exciting. So if you like some cold air, you come to the right place. So let's go back here and talk a little bit about, let me get in my little soapbox here. And you might remember back in the fall I gave a presentation, I remember it, but you probably don't, where I announced a new center, a Center for Responsible and Accurate Predictions, or I call it CRAP. And you know, the idea, the mission behind CRAP is send us your crap and we'll see it gets disposed of. And there's this different strategy for CRAP, because there's a lot of crap out there in terms of forecasting. So the crap casting premise was that you would make predictions that are difficult to verify. You boast when you're correct and totally forget when you're wrong. As often as possible, predict opposite scenarios very close to each other, so that you know, you're going to be right half the time. And when egregious errors are made, self-flagellation is permitted. Okay. So of course I can't help but I love to pick on the Farmer's Almanac. Because they're out there, and I spent $7 to pay for this piece of crap, so I might as well pick on it. Now, actually, to their credit, you know, the blind squirrel found a nut and did predict cold and snowy, at least in parts of southern New England, which was right. Now, it did also predict cold and dry in Montana and eastern Colorado, which of course is having one of the warmest winters of record. So, and of course, cool and wet in Florida, which would have discouraged people who like to vacation there, and of course it's been anything but that.
The DC people are dying for snow.
Yeah, and it was cold and snowy. So yeah, it was also they haven't had no. It's there's a well, we're the glacier boundary is just south of us here. Yeah, And do keep right, by the way. So the crap weekly winner, and thanks to Fred for bringing this to my attention. Of course, we were watching it, but he actually helped to quantify what is true essence of crap. And this is the 13-kilometer GFS forecast. This is the high res, which is not available in most places, right?
Well, you can find it someplace.
Yeah, you have to pay more for this, you know.
Exactly.
And this is the 6Z run. So I didn't get a chance to look at the 12Z run. No doubt the 12Z run is full of crap also. But in this case, this is the forecast for 6Z for 12Z on Monday morning. And these are minimum surface temperatures and isobars. And you'll see that actually there's quite a bit of detail here. All the white area indicates temperatures 0 or lower. The gray area, the light gray area, indicates temperatures -10 or lower. And the dark gray areas indicate temperatures of -20 or lower. And there's even some darker gray areas in there, which is -30. This is Fahrenheit or lower. So thanks to Fred's...
a week ago, the Poughkeepsie area was last Saturday.
Yeah, it's just, what are they, opening up the ground or something here. All right. This actually, Fred was kind enough to actually go in and get the 13-kilometer grid point data. So here's the Erie shoreline. There's Lake Erie. There's Erie right there. Here are the different stations, UNV. UNV would have, this is 12Z, temperatures a snapshot, grid point data. We would have a temperature of -10 or -11 Fahrenheit, if this is correct, Monday morning. So those of you who have kids going to school, that would be grounds for a delay. But what was most fascinating was this just inland from Lake Erie, that's -37. And just in case you say, oh, that's ridiculous, well, there's another one here between Bradford and Warren of -35. Now, the state record is -42, which was set in Smethport, which is the other side of Bradford. So over here, they're not anywhere near as cold. So this would be unprecedented chill if it's correct, but I doubt it very much. And we know for a fact that actually the GFS, the new GFS, has a radiation balance problem. But this is crap, and yet inevitably, if somebody, somebody who doesn't know how to discern good versus bad model output could pipe this into the internet, not that this is ever done, without any filter, right? And just say, oh, look at this, 37 below zero forecast just inland from Erie in southern Erie County. So this gets the weekly winner for crap. By the way, SCASIS, which is a great tool, and I trust my colleagues in the Weather Service use this as well too. These are the all-time record minimum temperatures for at least this county warning area of CTP, and indeed, there's the -42. I must have erased that. There's 35, 40 degrees below zero up in the northern tier. Ours is -20, as is pretty well known. But you can see that if indeed this were right, there are some places that would be approaching their all-time record low temperatures, but it's not right. Okay, the other thing that is kind of interesting, I'm going to go back and look at the weather again, is the fact that I couldn't help, this a short story of this is that in listening to I told my wife it was going to get really cold this weekend. It's Valentine's Day weekend, so I said, we'll want to stay in. And, good way to justify not going out to dinner. And I told her, oh, this is going to be brutal on Sunday. And I said, I don't think we'll get out of the single numbers. I didn't realize what I was saying when I made that. This was about 3 or 4 days ago. So she was listening to the Channel 10 weathercaster. It was, they're good. And Regina Miller was saying high Sunday 16. So she took me to task and said, hey Paul, she's saying 16. What are you saying? I said, well, I think she's wrong. But then I came in and looking at SCASIS found out that indeed I was, by saying single numbers on Sunday, this would be the odds card on the 16th. This is for STCTP1, our station here, that the lowest max temperature on the 16th, Monday, is 10. So this is Sunday, ending Monday morning. So I didn't realize I was predicting a record low max by saying it was, say, in the single digits. I was, and I still agree with that. But then I know Rich has been looking at this as well, too. And now this is the GEFS from the 6Z run of the ensemble temperature predictions, 2-meter temperatures. So it's not MOS. This is 2-meter temperatures, which is quite different. DMO, as I like to call it, direct mile output, and it predicts actually temperatures may stay below zero all day on Sunday, which I doubt actually. But the idea is that it is quite likely that Sunday will be as cold of a day as we've had in quite a while. Low single numbers, maybe mid-single numbers, and then the question is, what will it be Monday morning?
An interesting aside is that the GFS forecasts a lot of days to go below zero this year, but the SREF has the opposite. It's got a warm bias.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the SREF now, 9Z, is showing like -10 is kind of like the mean and median.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it's showing us not going above zero now, too. I think like 18 members out of 21 keep us zero or
Well, this is
For the whole day?
Yeah.
I find that hard to believe.
Yeah,
The SREF's got a warm bias.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm just,
Yeah. Well, the news really is not that we're going to get a lot of snow.
it's chilly when you think of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And by the way, this is the other thing I brought up that I think will not be, well, it'll be overplayed and misunderstood. But the important component of this is that there's going to be a howling wind. There's going to be a 20 to 30 knot wind that's going to accompany this chill. Really, it reminds me back to 94 and then 85 and 82. Some of those extraordinary cold waves that we had were accompanied by 20 to 30 mile an hour winds. The difference, however, is that usually for us to get these extraordinary low temperatures, the cold air typically comes down Minnesota, Wisconsin, through Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, and then up from the west-southwest, because then it's not modified by the Great Lakes. When it comes across the Great Lakes, we lose a good 10 degrees Celsius warming. I mean, we lose the chill, which is to our benefit. Now, something else that's happening, though, of course, we have this enormous snow cover to our north, and also Lake Ontario, surprisingly, is beginning to freeze at a remarkably fast rate. And if you look at the record minimums east of the mountains, especially in large urban areas such as New York City and Boston, the cold air comes on almost a straight north wind. So it comes right down the Hudson Valley, Connecticut River Valley, into those places, unaffected by the Great Lakes. So even though I wouldn't predict, a negative 15 in New York City, which is their record low at Central Park, I think that there are places, perhaps in the Hudson Valley, that will get extraordinarily cold out of this because it won't be modified by the Great Lakes. And the wind chill is going to be a point of note that I think that most folks get kind of concerned when the wind chill gets to negative 20. That's the school district criteria for either postponing or canceling. And there's a local school district, that is. And I think that there's quite likely, of course, there would be no school on Sunday, but there's no school on Sunday anyway.
Just cancel school on Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. That's a very safe, that's a sure bet. But I think that Monday morning is an issue. Will there be any wind? And if so, what are going to be the issues regarding the wind chills? Because the air temperature may be, if the SREF is right, negative 10
Well,
anyway.
it's not as cold as theoretically on Monday morning.
Yeah, Monday, it should be, but the difference is the winds are lighter and the skies are clear. So there'll be some radiational cooling too. But anyway, that's kind of the fun part of all this. So here's the other thing, that the lake ice is increasing very, very quickly at this point. And this is courtesy of Fred and also our friends in Canada. You have any friends in Canada, Fred?
They're all friends of mine.
Okay. And this is the ice coverage season to date. Of course, last year was extraordinary, as you know, and we're trying to rival that. But if we look a little bit more closely, by the way, this is still one of the icier times going back to 1994 in terms of lake ice coverage. And if we see on Weather World, we presented a segment called Snow Risk just 2 weeks ago, and then the ice coverage was, I think, 39%. It is now rapidly approaching 60%. So the amount of ice coverage is growing at an extraordinary rate. Therefore, the modification of air masses coming across the Great Lakes will be much less as a result. I mean, there is some anyway. I know that there's flux of heat through ice, but it's certainly going to be diminishing. So we're coming into a climatologically snowy week ahead. If we look at historical data from February 14th to 20th, and I have Philadelphia on top here and Pittsburgh down below. This got on there by mistake. I didn't mean to point out 1957, it was a very good year. These are looking at occurrences of snow totals in that 6-day period. And even for Philadelphia, which has had not very much snow at all this winter, that this is a time when they typically get at least an inch or two. There are some years where they have nothing, or has more years than not that has several inches of snow during this week ahead. So, and in fact, when I was just cutting my eye teeth on snow forecasting, there was a certain amount of angst that I would feel, because I was the snow monitor at AccuWeather from 77 to 1980, during the week of second and third week of February. It's like, I wanted to be sick for a week, because I knew that was a time that typically would produce some pretty horrific snowfall. So I think that chronologically we're coming into a favorite time. So for those of you who are not familiar with forecasting snow, here are some basic ingredients just to make sure that you don't go hog wild on predicting things which are highly improbable. But the first thing we need is cold air, and there's of course going to have plenty of that. Second thing is we need moisture, which we are not having plenty of. We're starved for moisture. And the third thing is we need a distinct lifting mechanism. Those of you who've taken 415 with me have seen this. This is a good refresher anyway to remind you what's going on. And more importantly, my experience has been, since I had the opportunity to forecast the blizzard of '78 and a few other noteworthy storms to a lot of different folks in the late '70s and '80s, and of course with Weather World for the past 3 decades, that a southern branch disturbance is really necessary for a big storm. Now, you can still get an appreciable amount of snow out of an event coming in without a southern branch disturbance. But that's really, if you want a barn burner of a storm, you want something from the southern branch. Also, very important, is a warm advection produces much more precipitation than a strong cold front. A case in point was today. We had an enormous amount of cold advection, and we got, 1/100th of an inch. And we'll have it again on Saturday. Maybe we'll get 3/100ths of an inch or 5/100ths of an inch. Cold advection does not produce anywhere near as much as warm advection. That's why the event that potentially will come our way next week is more interesting. And I'd like to just remind you, predict the high. This is John Kerr's rule that I learned in weather forecasting many, many years ago. So a big high is what's needed. Big low makes a lot of wind. And that's why we'll have extraordinary wind Saturday late into Sunday, but not very much precipitation. This is just low pressure. But a big high is the overrunning surface. And this was the high that may have preceded, I think, the first President State storm in, was it 78, I think it was? 79, thank you. And there's other storms. There's again a big high in the Northeast. This actually is the Great Storm of 1950, which didn't have much of a high, but it had an enormous low. It was a 952 low by the time it ended up south of Cleveland. But this is the feature that we most often like to see, is a distinct short wave in the southern branch. Not everything that's coming our way, that came our way today, that's coming our way on Saturday and Sunday, is northern branch disturbance. What is being hinted at least toward next week, is a southern branch disturbance. So southern branch disturbances are really where the money is to be made with regard to forecasting snow. And you can pick the best storm track, and obviously all what we're getting right now are these blue arrows. They're just diving out of, in fact, even more of a northerly trajectory than that. And they are bombing near the East Coast, especially in southern New England, but they really have no moisture source for us. And the lakes are freezing up so fast that we couldn't get any moisture out of them anyway. The ones that come across the mid-continent are interesting if they can get going, but they tend to have a lot of westerlies and they get swept out offshore. The ones that come up out of the Gulf and go west of us, of course, are not very good because we get warm advected and also dry slide.
The orange and brown, you try to show the Miller B kind of re-evolution.
Yeah. And then of course there's the red one, which is kind of the classic. And in fact, when you look at the this is a tribute to my colleagues in the Weather Service who do work 9 days a week. Which type does the ECMWF favor for next Tuesday, Wednesday? This is the 0Z run forecasting for 0Z on Wednesday. So this is Tuesday evening, and it has a high to the north. Now the high's not perfect. The high's actually moved offshore. There's another one back there, but it does have a nice juicy low coming up out of the Gulf. So it would be much more typical of the red line here.
That Tuesday, was that 0Z?
0Z Wednesday.
So it's Tuesday evening.
Tuesday evening, yeah. Of course, there's been some
Waiver.
well, and the timing, and this is another time to kind of throw in basic rules about forecasting in the winter, especially these relatively important events, is that the cold air is slower. It's almost always slower than expected. So if you think it's coming in on Saturday, it probably comes in on Sunday. And it also is much slower to leave, too. So it does not move out anywhere near as fast. That's why I think that the Monday, even though the upper levels will be warming, Rich, I agree, and in the mean will be, the thicknesses will be up probably 200 meters, something like that. It will not be, the surface is not going to respond anywhere near as quickly. And the other side of that is that, and the classic term that we use is that warm advection waits for nobody. So warm advection, it will just, once it starts moving, it'll glide up those isotopes and be, carried along by that high-level jet, and it's here well before anybody expects it. So even though there's been some delay on this, I would think it's not going to be much later than what is currently said. If I can be a little bit faster.
I didn't see the 12s, the 60 GFS is kind of pretty much everything. Anytime after 12Z Tuesday, you could have snow and maybe even sleet.
Well, that's the crazy part about it, is that the next step after this, southern New England, eastern New England, has thicknesses, getting up to like 550.
Is this the 0Z run?
This is the 0Z run.
I didn't look at it, but I guess it had a pretty intense cycle.
What the ECMWF does? Well, because it phases the northern and southern branch, which I think is improbable. I'd say it's not likely. I think that's another bias of some of these models as they open phase. I think I want to go. Oh, here's the GFS plume from the 6Z run for State College precipitation. You see. Here there's some indication that this bomb, this Clipper bomb that will be coming over us during Saturday night, early Sunday, may produce the order of, at max, a tenth of an inch, which of course, in the ratios at these temperatures, may end up being 2 or 3 inches of snow. I'm not sure about that, but I would think that there'll be a pretty high ratio. Then we get nothing as we're deep in Siberia. And then we have this event that occurs 17th, 18th, which is the climatologically favorite time. And the mean, I guess this is the mean, Rich, for the whole period?
Yes.
All right. So we have to knock out a tenth or something like that out of this thing. So it's around 5,500ths.
I like the 148.
You know, like 148. Yeah, and that's no doubt what everybody will be forecasting, is 148. I think about a half of an inch of liquid seems a good starting point. And then it gives you room to move around and to say, oh no, it's going to be a little bit more or less. Whereas if you start with 12 or 14 inches, you can only go down from there. All right, I think we'll stop with that.
Well, one thing, the interesting issue here is if a lot of schools could be closed Monday because of the residual cold, especially northwest here.
I agree.
And if the snow does come in, or if it ends up evolving better, it's a really bad situation to have a late start. They could lose, theoretically, 2 days of school next week.
Well, they could lose 3. They could lose Wednesday too.
Yeah.
If there's wind with this thing and the cold air is back in and they can't clear it off. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're trying to catch up to our compatriots in New England who are going to be going to school until the 4th of July.
They're more like patriots and compatriots.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Compatriots. Right. I don't know what I just hit here. I somehow got into something I never looked at. So let's go back. Hello. There you go. I wanted to look at see, you all have maybe had a chance to look at this. I have not yet seen the, well, let's look at the NAM, since it's always worth a good chuckle. And see what, well, here's today's chill down. Tomorrow morning, it looks like the winds are slackening. Granted, we're in a deep northwesterly flow. Thicknesses are 5-10. High in the Ohio Valley, okay, it's cold. Then we go ahead, and here comes this disturbance on the north side of Lake Superior, which is an unusual trajectory, but it even has some sub-480 air coming behind it. And this is where it's kind of interesting. It pivots the low so that the main surface low actually goes to the north of Toronto and heads up into the St. Lawrence Valley, but of course has this pendage of of low pressure developing to the south, and I think it's the next time step. This is now at 54, so 60 hours should show some bombing going on here. Yeah, well, not some. It's now moved into northeastern Pennsylvania, and then here's where it gets really kind of interesting. Notice the number of isobars. This is 60 Sunday, so the upper level low is actually very close to us. The low is to drop to sub 992, and the thicknesses are somewhere in the high 480s. So this is quite cold, and it'll feel like it too with the wind blowing. I suspect that's a pretty good 20, 30 knot wind, and the chills will be quite extraordinary. And then it does slacken a little bit. Does this 84 takes us to, so just to Sunday night. Thicknesses are still 510-ish. The rule I had back in the late 70s, when we still had thicknesses, by the way, we looked at those things, but the models were much cruder, was that we could actually, I used for time period in late December, January, early February, the last two numbers of the 1,500 millibar thickness were a good prediction of the temperature. So that's why, if you want to go literally, 48 thickness is -12, but this would say the temperature by Sunday afternoon would be around 10 or something like that, or 8, if that were right. It really is not all that good, but it was fun. And given that moss was very primitive in the 70s, it certainly was a competitor.
It was cave moss back then, right?
It was cave moss? Yeah, it may have been. I'm sure Glenn would like to hear us say that. So we can look at the GFS to see what's happening in the longer term, and then I'll go back to my last bit of a rant, and then we'll wrap it up. So we want to jump ahead beyond 84 to see what's lurking. See, here's the southern branch wave, and it does get dabbed out. If I do Control minus, that make it bigger. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's the wave. The high is not perfect. So the fact that but the thing in our advantage is that the northern branch wave looks like it's lagging a little bit. Looks like it. I mean, I'm not sure. I haven't studied all the timing of this. But if the northern branch wave is lagging, that tends to kick the southern branch up farther north and west than would the models typically show. This was a classic thing that happened 2 weekends ago, where we ended up, with the low going right over us. But this is at 120. So let's find the cursor. And here we are at this is midday Tuesday, and there it is. It's just kind of blossoming, running very fast up into the Carolinas, and we're already precipitating by 0Z, and the thicknesses are near critical in the southeastern corner of Pennsylvania. But here's where it gets kind of exciting for folks in New England, because the low takes a track relative to liquid for us, a very favorable track. My experience has been, an inland runner, as we sometimes call them, one that runs pretty much from, near Atlanta or just south of Atlanta up to near Raleigh, between Raleigh and Hatteras, and then between Philadelphia and Atlantic City, are excellent for getting good liquid back in these parts, or at least between here and Harrisburg. And this one seems to be taking a track very similar to that, maybe a little bit farther east. But remember, I think if there's a bias, it's that the models tend to be a little bit too far east early on with the wave that's being kicked out. But the thicknesses here in New England are, excuse me, are forecast to be already near or above 540, and the next time step, yeah, the low actually looks like it goes right over Boston. Move to this thing here. Anyway, there it goes. But here we have, by the time we get into Wednesday, we're already back into sub 510 thickness, 504, heading down below -20 at 850. This is just, not pleasant. So if you're looking for a really wintry week, you picked the right week coming up.
Paul, do you think that's a phasing issue too, that it's over-phasing the event? It looks like instead of being kicked out, it's being absorbed. Do you see the same thing?
You know, the northern branch is just so strong that I think it'll just get absorbed. Yeah. It's not such a well-defined cutoff. It is now, you know, the swirl in the southwest, but I think it'll just get, the evection fields will overwhelm it, and that's why our only hope is if we get some a long, or at least a prolonged period of warm evection. But it looks to me, you know, at this point, I've already said it to our team forecasting for DOT that it's a 3 to 6. This is 3 to 6. 3 to 6. So I don't see anything that would change my mind yet. You know, there'll be, as Fred will commonly say, lollipops of probably 8, but there'll also be some places they'll get snookered and get 2. And that's just, we won't know that detail until probably Monday afternoon or Monday evening. If I can have 3 more minutes of your time, and we'll just wrap this up here. Because I did say, what about the spring? This is what we forecast. The CFS for the winter forecast warmth in western North America and the Northwest. Actually, it was pretty good. This is, granted, I missed 12 days in December, but it had the right idea there. Did not have the right idea in New England, but did have the right idea down here in Texas. This is the ECMWF forecast that I showed you back in October. Actually, it was late September, it was early October. And it was forecasting actually cool in December in Colorado, which was really awful. Although there was one cool spot there. Maybe they'll verify that, knowing how they'll use their statistics. And here's but it did get the idea that warm would dominate. Did not really get a good signal for January. Here's the January verification. By the way, if you had just looked at neutral ENSO rather than warm, and picked the positive phases of the AMO and PDO, which were true coming into the winter, this is what I looked at for December, January, February temperatures. There aren't too many analogs, but the prediction was a high probability of, this is above normal, so really cooler than normal temperatures in the Northeast. So this actually wasn't a bad outlook, just based upon analogs. So sometimes the analogs can serve you well if you know which ones to look for. Precipitation, the CFS was predicting wet in the west and in Texas, and patches of dry in the Northwest. This is the precip so far, and it really didn't do, it did okay here in the Ohio Valley, it did okay in Texas, but California, of course, is a whole other story. This is the ECMWF forecast, and take my word on it, it really did very poorly in terms of precipitation. So for all the accolades that the ECMWF gets in terms of the short-range forecast, it really is not all that much better in the longer range. Dan remembers this. This is what I said back in October, early October. The warming trend must be considered. Back-to-back cold winters do happen. Another cold winter would buck the ENSO trend, and perhaps it's time for wide swing winter with extremes on both ends. You know, that may arguably have been the case farther west of here, but not really so much here. It's been relatively persistent chill. Here are the, you know, the seasonal drivers are primarily, you know, the ocean temperatures and any anomalies, and of course the surface-driven effects such as albedo changes in the frozen lakes. This is where things are right now, or at least as of, I should say, about a week or so ago. And it's still warm in the equatorial Pacific between, you know, about 150 east and around 120 west. Yeah, if we look at the model, it still shows a weak El Nino persisting, although the CFS, you know, which is a very good model for predicting ENSO, is taking us into a strong, and this would be strong, El Nino in the summertime, which is like, and I chuckled at this when I saw this, but then I looked at the ECMWF sea surface temperature forecast for May, June, and July, and it also shows warm. So I'm not sure what's going on, but I think there's some concern that that there will be a resurgence. And I showed in the 460 class, we just looked at, there's actually another Kelvin wave moving along that will likely surface in the next couple of weeks. But the PDO is the dominant signal. The warmth in the North Pacific is extraordinary, and even though we're in a cold phase, we're not cold now, nor have been for the past 18 months. So if we just look at the forcing of PDO, high values of the PDO, forget ENSO and all these other sort of distractions, this is what the March, April, May would look like. And it would see a dominance east of the Mississippi, especially of cool, especially in the southeastern U.S., and also dryness, as you might expect in the northwesterly flow, in the middle of the country. Which, by the way, this sort of dryness can be the seeds of a hot summer, at least in the northern plains, and precipitation near normal. And that is all I'm going to say. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any quick questions for Paul? No? Well, thank you very much, Paul. This is great. Really appreciate it. No, that's totally fine. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here next week, too.
Yeah, absolutely.